So, welcome
Hey.
to Feeling Seen, the UNC CAPS Podcast. And this is Dr. Anthony Teasdale alongside my partner in crime, Dr. Aaron Scott.
Hello, hello.
So, what were we going to be talking about today, Aaron?
Yeah, so welcome back. I think we said in the last podcast, it's so exciting to be picking this back up again. We have some topics this round that Anthony has been really thoughtful about. And the one we wanted to touch on today is failure. I think that failure can get a really bad rep, but there can be some lessons connected to failure as well. So just want to kind of talk a little bit about the lessons that failure has taught, some of the lessons failure has taught us, but also to maybe reframe the idea of failure as something, negative or not good into something that can be helpful along your journey. Um, yeah, how's that sound?
That sounds great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I think this topic came to mind for me thinking about the students that we work with here at UNC and very high achieving, want to do well, which makes a lot of sense. But how that becomes a very perfectionistic approach to things, and it has to be A, and it has to be the top grade, and looking around and comparing so many people comparing themselves to other people. And if it seems like, which we do a terrible job of looking at other people and knowing what's going on with them anyway, but
Right.
looking and thinking, oh, they're not seemingly working hard, which means I'm so much dumber and all of that. And so that's where some of this question came from. But really it was that perfectionism that's so much a part of what we see at our counseling center and in our student body, but have seen around so many other people, just that sense of it has to be perfect, which means there can't be any room for failure, and that somehow
Yeah.
that failure becomes this thing of like a failure means I am a failure, or
Mm,
it's this global, it means there can never be good things, there could never be success. And so these just attempts to ward off any sort of sense of failure. And when we say failure, we don't even mean like F or the catastrophic, but just something that doesn't exactly go as the
yeah.
person might have predicted
Yeah.
most, and it being somehow this crushing, earth-shattering thing that people somehow are holding the idea that they will never recover from. Or
Recover. I think I've been so fortunate maybe to have experienced very early in life that I'm not good at everything. And I think sometimes when we when we have, especially with the student body that we have here, students who are used to being good at pretty much everything that they try, I think that they get the lesson later in life that it's really, really rare to be good at everything that you ever try to do. Again, so for some of us, I'll use myself. I have a very clear memory of trying out for the Muse Machine years ago. I wanted to be. I thought performing was in my future, and it wasn't. It simply wasn't. I missed all of my cues to come in on the song. I was doing Bette Midler's "Wind Beneath My Wings," which is not in my range at all. I had to learn a choreographed step and do that, and it was terrible. I had 2 left feet, and while it hurt, I will be honest, I was in the 7th grade and, I could see my name in Stars and Lights, so while it hurt to not get the call back to be in the play, they were doing The Wizard of Oz, I'll never forget, um, it taught me that I was proud of myself for trying. And I clearly remember after, dealing with the pain and the disappointment and the heartache, because that was there too, I'll be honest with you. Um, then there was a clear feeling of, but you know what? I'm glad you tried. Because a lot of people, and this is sort of connected to this idea of failure,
yeah,
are
you're
so afraid of not doing well or failing that they don't ever even try. And so you know, as it's as humorous as it is, the lesson that it taught me was that there's a lesson and there's a message, and there was so much in it for me to have at least tried. It didn't pan out, but that's okay. I still enjoy the arts. I still, I'm a purveyor of it, but I'm not a performer, and that's okay. But I would have never known if I had tried. If I had just let that idea itch in my brain and just had already for closed or been foreclosed the idea that I'm not going to do it or do well, then I would never know. And now I know that I have two left feet, and now I know that I can't, come in on a piano cue and sing. But again, a humorous example, but I do think that um, there's a lot for me personally. There's just a lot of strength and pride in trying.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on something hugely important, and I'm glad you are because I think it's important for us to talk about, which is that trying piece. That comes up so much for people around this perfectionism and the fear of failure that it
Yes.
keeps people from, like you said, even trying things. And so I know you and I end up talking with people. One of the sort of most central things I think to therapy, why people are stuck, what's happening is avoidance. And I think
Yes.
connects a lot to the not trying. And it's this and I talk with people about, a lot of times what people think is not that it's not uncomfortable or whatever, but it's like
Right.
I feel so anxious and that's the thing they're scared of, or I don't want to fail because then it's this fear of what that failure will mean, or maybe how that'll wreck. It feels like maybe that wrecks them with their self-esteem and some of that kind of thing. And so that's the fear around not trying or wanting to avoid things. But then for me, it's the idea of when you're doing that, you're not actually experiencing life. You're not actually,
Yes.
and that's why I think what you're bringing up is so important because we're actually really poor at times at prediction. And one of the things you don't know and why it's important to try is you don't know where things will go.
That's right.
So even in your example, not that this is what happened, but I
Right.
see it happen from my own life experience and others, which is maybe you try out for that thing and it doesn't go your way and is hugely successful. But what could come from it is who might you have met? And could you
Mhm.
have made some connections or friendships that carry you forward, even if
Yes.
you're not performing? Or
Mhm.
what could it mean to know you can put yourself in that situation for a future thing that you put yourself in because you say, you know what, I'm excited to just see how this goes. And maybe
Yes.
that ends up working out in a certain way because you put yourself in the situation to try. If you don't put yourself in, nothing can come.
Nothing. Yeah.
And so that's really the thing of not trying or of avoidance is that nothing, nothing comes out of it. The way I
Mhm.
often give the image and about avoidance is the idea of I see it as like roads converging almost in a forest, and
Okay.
an avoidance or not trying is a road that goes nowhere. It runs into a brick wall. And so
Mm,
every moment where that wall is going, which is nowhere. Other roads go off. You can't exactly tell where they're going. They could go to a great place. They could go to something, but at least there's possibilities at the end of them. And I
yeah.
think that's what you're speaking to is in trying, there is possibility. And not trying, there is no possibility.
Absolutely.
That. And that's why I think your point is so important and why it's important, even though it can be scary, why
Mhm.
we're having this discussion in many ways is what failure can teach us, what it can mean to fail or to try and not get that absolute desired result doesn't mean it was a complete waste of time, and how important that is to learn that. And if we just sit on, I'm not going to do it unless I absolutely know I'll be successful at it, what life experiences does that rob us of? Or
We
what does
miss
that
out.
keep us
Mhm.
from doing, including what could be things about like making friendships and connections or even romantic relationships. If we don't put ourselves out there, we can't get to those connections.
Wow. Yeah. I love so much of what you're saying because sometimes I think to your point of we people will avoid because they don't unless they're fairly certain they're going to be successful. And so it can be this real dichotomy of I'm either going to do well or not, and so I'm not going to even try. But there in the middle is really life, right? I survived that. It wasn't the worst fit. And so when I said I felt proud of myself, it was because it was a stretch, right? But it was something that I wanted to do. I tried it, I survived it, and life didn't stop. And so to your point, so many experiences. everything we do, we're not going to be great at. We will be probably great at some things, probably not everything. That just probably isn't going to happen. But there's so much still richness and in the experience of trying. And we see a lot of students who won't even try unless they are almost certain or fairly certain that they're going to be successful. And I think they just, to your point, they end up missing out on so much. That to me is life. Because, so going back to that example and connecting it to how that experience of putting myself out there then allowed me later on in life when I was sort of finishing school and not quite ready to dive into professional work, decided to become a flight attendant. And I remember thinking, you know what it's like to stand in front of people and do that, you can do this. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be good at it or not. But I'd like to think that that earlier Muse Machine experience of performing, although it didn't go the way I liked, that it made it a little bit easier when it was time to do it later on. And even if that hadn't worked out, I think again, I
Mhm.
could still build off those experiences. It doesn't have to be a 0 or 1, right? Like you either it's like a terrible, horrible thing, or I'm amazing at it. Like
Yeah.
it was an experience. It happened. I survived it, and no damage was done. I can laugh about it now. It was even funny then. Um, but I do think we see it a lot, and how I think it can, excuse me, impact perfectionism is that a lot of times we will see students who are in professions or in majors, I'll say majors, in majors that have a lot of prestige and esteem and they think that they will do well at, and then they get in there and maybe they don't like the content or they're not doing well. And so you do have a camp of students who will persist despite doing quite honestly terribly, and they will keep going because they feel like nope, this is the trajectory that I have for myself. And then you have others who won't even try something else that they could be great at, that could really fulfill their passion, that could make them, be exactly what they need. They're afraid to even try. They're on this path, they're going to stay on this path. And so yeah, I was thinking about what you were saying, and I think that part of what I think can trap people is this idea of, that I either it's two options. There's like this forced dichotomy of this will either be I'll be terrible at it or amazing at it. And what about the the vast majority of experiences in life, which are they're just fine and they're okay and you'll be okay, kind of a thing, you know?
Such a great example of how you tied becoming a flight attendant into that earlier experience of performance and thinking about that and knowing. But I think again, I joke with people oftentimes these decisions, what you're saying, and it can become this thing of where I say it's not like you're, going to prison. So they treat the decision as though they're locked
Mm,
into it forever. So like you as a flight attendant, you can go do that. And if you don't like it, if it doesn't go well in some way, you're not trapped there forever. That it
right.
doesn't, you can change. And there's this, and that's what the fear of failure can create is what you were saying about the forced dichotomy. It can create almost like an idea of either this decision has to work out completely well or not. And I have to, and it's like that's where people are making the decision from. Instead of
Yeah.
you use the best information you have at the time, but then you go into it and you experience it. And
Yes.
it could be really amazing. It could be amazing for a time. You could still change. It might not be, but you're not trapped in it. But people end up making the decision because they're coming from that perfection, fear of failure place.
Yes.
The decision ends up feeling like, or they make it from a perspective like it's do or die. This one decision can't come back from it. We can't, and it's not true. It's not true
Not
of
true.
many, if not most, life.
Yeah.
But that's what can happen when we're in the fear of failure place. So I think your example was just such a great one of how you built on that, how you learned from that, and what that then meant for you of making that choice to go in that direction, and what I'm sure you learned about yourself and the experience you got to have from it, even if, as we're saying, that's not what you do now.
Right. That was just a thing to do. And I wasn't, yeah, to your point, locked in. And um, I think something you said made me think about what if we praised effort versus outcome? Because a lot of what we see is the focus on the outcome and a total diminishing of the effort. What if we started, I'm an attachment-based person, so I'm thinking little folks and how we can, shape them up. But what if we started, instead of only praising the principals list or the honor roll, or you got perfect straight A's in attendance, you try really hard this semester. I know that or this quarter, I guess they do it, this grading period, you worked really hard, and maybe I know you struggled here, or this is an area you put in a lot of effort. I wonder if we meaning the collective, right? Not necessarily you and I, but if folks started praising effort, I wonder how that might shift the focus on perfectionism. Because I wonder if a lot of what happens is that when you get your validation from doing something well, the bar is now high and you've got to keep reaching it. And then maybe our caregivers' expectation is that we continue to do that, but also our own. We sort of feed into that. I know I'm capable of that. And there is something to knowing what you're capable of and knowing when you're not giving full effort, right? That's fine. But to the perfectionist point, I think if we maybe took a little bit of that pressure off of the final outcome and appreciated the process and the journey more, because that's what we're really talking about. I hear as I think about again, sort of humorously, the things in life that have uh, taught me some lessons that were not necessarily wins. Excuse me. I think it's the process though. And again, that pride that I felt and the way that I was able to pick myself up and keep going and not internalize that I didn't get this as somehow I'm not enough or bad or this, I didn't feel that. I was able to recognize that there are things that I do really well. And this isn't necessarily one of them. Now, I could have continued to persist. And I'm sure if we look at the people that we look up to who are doing amazing things, they have stories where they haven't always done it right? To my earlier point, that's just, I think it's probably virtually impossible that we do everything perfect all the time. So there is something to getting back in the ring. And if I had felt more like performing was really my thing, I'm sure I would have tried out for another thing. I think it was sort of like, "Oh, okay, I've got nothing to lose," right? But the point being that there's a choice point, I feel like, when you get to um, decisions in life, opportunities in life, where to your point, that one is a road that leads nowhere if I don't even try and I avoid. The other is unknown and to be written, and I don't actually know. And even if it doesn't mean it's going to work out perfectly or in a way that I even like or satisfactory, I still think the journey, the meandering, the figuring out, I think there's still so much richness in that process. Um, I don't think the collective, focus enough on that process and how you can learn so much about yourself, and you can, there's some things and some characteristics and some development that can happen during that period of time. And you pick yourself back up and you keep going and you practice resilience, and you learn about yourself and you figure out, okay, maybe this isn't my passion, but maybe that curiosity is birthed of what is then. If it's not this, then what? Um, so yeah, just curious of any of that and the effort and outcome conversation. What do you think about any of that?
Oh, I think you're touching on so many important things about process, and I'm thinking about so many important things now, trying to organize my thoughts. What was coming to mind, one was I love sports, particularly
Okay.
basketball, and I was thinking about Kobe Bryant would talk a lot about moments of failure in particular. Like as a Laker fan, I can think of moments where early in his career he took some final shots in some games, some playoff games, and airballed, just shot an airball at the end. Um, and he talked about across his career what those moments meant and the idea of not being afraid to fail. Um,
Mm,
so he could have taken those air balls, those moments, and said, I'm never going to try to shoot again when the game's on the line, when it's at the end, when it's at its most important. I'm never going to do that. But then a critical part of his legacy would have then been lost, because his legacy is one of the great clutch players, as the player who was always going to be willing to take the tough
thank
shot,
you.
to make the big play that you could rely on to show up in the end in those moments. But if he had given into that, I failed these times
Yep.
and had stopped, he wouldn't have had the other times where he was able to do it, where he was successful, and he wouldn't have gotten to that. And so I thought about that, and thought about what you were sharing there, which is if we don't give room where if failure just stops us from ever trying again, then there's no chance of that future success or the thing working and coming through and learning something. And so that's really critical. So that was one thing I was thinking was just Kobe Bryant, and lots of sports people will share about failures and learning from that and how they have to come through. And even the greatest in the sports still have moments of failure. I'm also thinking of I'm a big tennis fan and Roger Federer, and he's one of the greatest ever and has 20 Grand Slams and still had to deal with moments where he lost in big matches and lost at the end and had to come back and still have the belief I can do it. And it's that thing of do you just give in and say, that didn't go well, and so now we just give up, or do you come
Right.
back and what can then happen that's great in that. And it not just from the perspective of I get to win the trophy again, but I also get to keep doing something I love,
One that I love. Yeah.
play this other sport. So just thinking about that and opportunity, and then also thinking very strongly about what you're saying and agreeing with you about process, and celebrating the process, and that's part of what gets us so into trouble around perfectionism and fear of failure, I think, is that we divorce ourselves from process, which I think is one of the only places we have much control or power. Often
Mm,
we don't have that much power over outcome. We can do everything right a lot of
mhm.
times in something, and the outcome can still not be what we want it to be. And that's
Yeah.
important to learn to control, I think, or to put effort into places we have more say, more power. And so you speaking to process, I think, is really important. And that comes up in so many ways. It comes up in educational context, it comes up in
Yeah.
relationships. I talk to people all the time and they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. And it's reminding people all you can control is what you bring to
Yes.
action, how you show up, how you say things, what you express and are willing to share. And the other person then gets to react, and their
Mm,
reactions can be whatever it is. Hopefully it'll be, but you could do it for an outsider. You could have done it perfectly. And
right.
the person at the other end could still be like, I hate what you just said. And you can't control that, but you can have a say in how you show up, and you're part of the process. So one of the things I try to live in my life, if I think about that, is I try to live authentically, be direct, and be honest. And
Hmm.
especially if I think about relationships, that's what I can bring. That what I'm saying I value and will sign up for is if you and I, Aaron, are having an issue with each other, instead of
Hmm.
it festering in the background and maybe I'm doing weird stuff and you're like, what's going on?
What is going on?
What I've tried to pledge myself to is I will tell you, Aaron, when that thing happened, I was hurt and I'm upset with you. And
Mm,
that's what I have say in, and that's process. And
yes.
so that's why I love you bringing up process and the idea of failure.
Yes.
That really rings true for me because I we can forget.
Hmm.
And that's where I think we have a real say. And so it's in that example I just gave interpersonally, but it also relates to things about, like, let's say, education and the idea of if you put in a lot of your best effort and you
Yeah.
try and you stay open to the idea of learning, that gives you more chance of success than some other approach, which is I'm not going to do this at all. I only do stuff where I absolutely know I'll be successful. Good.
Yeah. Good
And
luck with that.
yeah, and that's why education maybe can be a struggle for some people because you can end up in a place where the reason you're in school or you're trying to learn is that you don't know something. And
Hmm.
take an approach that's essentially, I should know this already, even though I've had no contact with it and have never heard of it, but I should know how to do it perfectly. You've set yourself up for failure. That makes no sense, but that is the pressure people can feel when there's a sense of a fear of failure versus a process idea, which is I want to stay open to learning. I'm
Um,
interested in this. and I will do my best in that, and then we will see how it goes.
So much because using following that example, if you persist, the expectation that you do it right or perfect the first time, how often does that happen? But if you continue, if you pick yourself up, if you keep, whether it's, yeah, a sport and you just keep going and trying, or I don't know, math and you just keep trying, you work those equations,
Mhm.
that, like you said, controlling what you can control is your best chance of getting the outcome that's more favorable for you. And even then, if it's not, it's not because you haven't tried. You didn't try once and say, I'm not good at this thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I don't know many people who are good at something they've never seen before the very first time, and now they can just do it. Where are those people? And where are they? What planet are they from? You know what I mean? So I think that's the other piece. And also the differentiation between I failed and I'm a failure. I think that as I reflect back on, and I'm sure you have stories from your life as well, but thinking about your Kobe example and even my example, yeah, I failed that time, but I'm not a failure. I failed those times, but I'm not a failure. Because when we adopt that mindset of I'm a failure, then that does tend to shut us down from wanting to continue to try. So if you can change and reframe it from, yeah, I failed this time, and even if it's multiple times, that doesn't mean that all you are is a failure, that you're a person that failed at this thing. And I like to even, yeah, even compartmentalize it more. Like I didn't do well on this one thing, this one time, or this however many times, right? But that's certainly, I think that growth, openness mindset that you talked about is so necessary and so important. And I think that's why Kobe could continue to perfect his craft and then be known as a clutch player. I think that's why people who can keep going and practicing, and all of the greats, right? Like you said, have stories of times that they haven't done well, but they didn't let that define who they were. And when people let it define who they are, it tends to shut them down. And then they don't want to try anymore. So I think that that's a differentiation that we can maybe help people in this conversation think about. I failed. I'm not a failure, right? That even when I say it, I'll be honest, there's a heaviness to I'm a failure that I feel that I don't feel when I say I failed. It's not necessarily pleasant, but there's something about even I'm a failure, defining myself by that I feel embodied, that feels heavy and yeah, pulls me down and makes me feel like, just discouraged. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're speaking to so many important things. Yeah, the labeling, how you can even feel it in your body. I failed versus I'm a failure
Mm,
being very different, and I'm a failure being so global. And if you say that, especially off one thing, but then you almost believe it of yourself, what don't you do? Or then so much of your life can get filtered through that lens of I'm a failure. And then that's where a lot of other problems come in. And so, yeah, I think it's so important what you're saying. And you're also speaking to the importance of persistence and resilience, and the idea of we don't get everything right the first time, or we don't, but that's a part of learning and that's a part of life. And it's inevitable that that's also the thing we haven't said yet, but is part of this conversation, which is we will all fail. It's
yeah.
inevitable. We will not get it right. We will not, because that's just the human experience. And so you can approach it that way and know that, and still get up and still keep trying and still work at something and learn more and get better at something. Or you can be in that place of give up, or never
Hmm.
try. And where does that leave you? And one of the feelings, fortunately, I don't think I experience a ton, but I know other people live with, and I don't want to live with a ton, is the idea of regret and
Mm,
avoidance and fear and not
yeah.
trying. That's what that really is going to bring up for people in their lives. If you do a lot of not trying and avoiding, then you will be racked with regret. You will not know what was possible, because there will be a whole lot of instances of, I could have gone in this direction, this could have happened, it might have been, but you never gave it a shot, so you never know. And we don't have a time machine, we can't go back, so then that's just there. And
And we don't have a crystal ball. We can't see the future, which people often want, like to your earlier point of like, we want to predict that I'm going to do this well. We don't have that ability. All we have is our effort and our, the opportunity.
yeah. So yeah, it's what you just said, and would you rather live thinking about, and I think people have spoken to this of would you rather live in a lot of regret or would you rather have that experience of I failed, but at least I know. And I think what people who've lived both things would realize is, or at least I know I would, is I'd rather deal with the failure than regret because regret for me feels like a never ending question that will never get answered. The
Yeah.
failure closes something, it at least gave information. And like you said, too, thing about process, it may not even be a full I got nothing, even though I'm saying the word failure, because again, like I said in that example, not that it happened, but if you try
Yeah.
out for something where you're doing performing arts, it would not be crazy if even if you didn't get that role, you maybe made a friend or you
Hmm.
made contact. Or maybe what you learned in the process was maybe I'm not going to be the actor, but maybe now I'm going to help design the sets. And
Uh-huh. Yep.
world. I'm still in that place. I still do something I'm passionate about that I found through trying, even if it wasn't to become the front of stage, center stage person. And so we never know what could come from the trying, what can come from different experiences, the serendipity of life,
Yeah.
and like you said, we don't have the crystal ball. And that's what also not trying does. It cuts off those other things that could have happened that we can't predict.
Predict.
That is just really, yeah, really huge, really important. So I was going to share. You were asking about me, and what we're talking about what we've learned from failure, and so you
Hmm.
process. And one of the most important parts of my life, I think, for me, especially because I've been so in the world of education, was in junior year of high school. I was used to being an A student through to that time, and then at that time, I took a math class called analysis in high school, and also took physics. And struggled horrendously in both of those, especially for me at that time of barely achieving a C. And this is big for me as an A student. And I was the student that at that time, if I didn't get an A on the exam, it could ruin my whole day and I could be in all this emotional turmoil around something. And that year was so important for me because of realizing one, the struggle, and that it just continued through the year of, hey, the best I can do is a C in these classes. And I'm getting D's at times, I'm getting F on some stuff. Um, and realizing that I had too much coupled being an A student to my sense of self worth and identity. And I needed to not do that. I needed to decouple that in some way, especially because of what it robs me of, which is that one of the things that's most core to me is that I love learning and that I can get cut off from that if all I'm focused on is outcome, if all I'm focused on is I get the A or not. And the realization that I have taken in my life, especially earlier, many, many things where I got an A on an exam or I got an A in a class and I didn't learn anything. I am good at memorization, so I can memorize in a short amount of time, regurgitate it out, and get an A on something. That is
Mm-hmm.
not learning. And so the realization that if what I care about is actually learning, and that's something important to me, to
Yeah.
come at it from that perspective and not link A's and an A on everything to whether I have worth or a good day or any of that. But that ended up being really important for me because then when I went to college, I went to UNC Wilmington. When I went off to college, what I thought about as I went off was I like learning. I'm going to take these classes and try to choose things I think I'd be interested in. And then I'm just going to put my effort into let's see how I do with learning. So process. Let's
Yeah.
focus there. And then what comes will come in terms of grades. And it did end up working really well. I was really excited because I got a 4.0 and all A's in that first semester. But what it really taught me, and I think this has been true of me, period, anyway, is if I come at things in my life from a place of I'm interested in it, I'm excited about it, focus on the process, things more times than not work out
Yeah.
and that's really a better place to be in and a better place to learn from than oh my god I gotta get an A because really it ends up being not true. Again, I don't learn. And so then I'm not even getting the thing I value from it. And it puts all of this pressure on me anyway. And so it lessens some of that pressure to be able to go through college and then grad school with this idea of, I love learning. And that's why I put effort in and spend energy because I want to know these things for myself.
Yes.
And that usually produces good things versus I need to just get this A.
Get
Bye.
it? Yeah.
Um,
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. So much came up as you were sharing that. And the last piece I want to talk about, because I know there's some grad programs, I think here there's a lot that they do pass or high pass or whatever. And especially at the graduate level, I appreciate that. That was not my program. We had grades, but I appreciate that because it does take the focus off of I'm going to work really hard to get that A and to the sometimes no matter if I know the stuff or not, if I can regurgitate it or I can just perform well to I think it helps you focus on getting the knowledge to your point. And so, like I said, we didn't have that and I did great, so that's not the issue. But I think it took until grad school, that process that you talked about for me to honor that that's what was important. And for me, it was a realization that I'm going to be doing this. Like it's no longer about having this knowledge to pass a test to get a grade. It's like this is going to be your profession, your livelihood. You need to know this stuff. And I was interested in it. But yeah, I think so many of the lessons when you were 16 and or junior and kind of grappling with like, does this globally who I am because I'm not doing well here and I'm just used to doing well. And I think that's a really important, and we see it here. We see students grappling with or trying to disembed the way that they have coupled their performance with who they are and their self-worth as a person. And it's been reinforced a lot of times throughout the years because we have, as you started this off with, a high performing, high achieving group of students, brilliant minds, but they can live and die with every grade. And so when courses that we know are traditionally tough and people are struggling in a class that lots of people struggle in, they can then say, I'm a failure, I'm dumb. Oh, and they can have this sort of imposter syndrome, but also almost a crisis of self of what does this mean about me? Instead of what am I getting from this? Now, of course, I don't want to be, you have to get grades to be able to pass, to be able to get your degree. That's the way the system's set up. So it's not to say that it's not important what you get, but I do think that shift has to happen for you, that mindset shift where you can't connect the two, because when you continue to connect the two, then when I don't do well, not only does it have the potential to ruin your day, your mood, it can then globally start to be how you perceive yourself, and then it can impact how you move forward. And we see it in terms of students coming here with real distress around, I'm failing this class and I've never failed before, and this means I can't. And then they've already foregone that this means I can't reach that goal that I've been working for my whole life because of this one class. Um, so I appreciate hearing you and how you, and maybe in another podcast, we can talk about how you like what was the process. But I think that's such an important piece. And I think to our point earlier of, I think that's what allowed me to fail at performing and fail at that was the only time I failed in life. But that piece again is humorous to me because just some of the specifics, but and to be able to still pick myself up and go out for other things and try out for other, whether it was a sport, team or dance team or, orchestra, I was still able to put myself out there because I hadn't connected the outcome to who I am as a person. Um, there have been times that I have done that and I had to disembed, as you're saying, but I think that that's just a really important thing for people to consider.
yeah. Yeah, very true. And yeah, one moment doesn't have to define us. And um, yeah, to just look out for that, like you said. And even for me, I'm in this part position now, I have a PhD, so I think I did well through school and that kind of thing. But the danger at the moment would have been if I link it to, like you said, and make it a global thing, and I'm not good and not smart, then you end up carrying that forward and it could be a lot more damage versus, I think the reality is, like you said, we can't all be good at everything. And so the reality is, I think that two things could be true. I think I could have been a good student in a lot of ways. I think I could be intelligent if we want to use that word. And at the same time, I am never going to be a physicist and never going to be that good at physics. And so there are just things I'm not going to get and
Yeah,
things I'm
yeah.
not going to understand. And that can be okay. And I
That could be okay.
it's things I'm passionate about that I really connect to strongly and seem to be able to, yeah, transmit, at least with what we do, transmit to someone else and hopefully be helpful to other people. So yeah, we can't be great at everything too. And so that's again maybe that perfectionism we started with, which is that realization we can't be great at everything. So perfection, again, if we talk about chasing things that are a fantasy and not possible, we can't be perfect. So
It's a myth. Yeah.
there's that. So I know you need to go with your schedule. So I just wanted to share a thing. Let's see if I can find it. I have a lot of quotes up,
Okay.
up in my office because I like quotes. Um, but I have a quote by Albert Einstein on the wall, and it says, "Anyone who has never made a mistake has never tried anything new."
Mm,
Think that that speaks to what we're talking about. It's a sensitive idea of anyone who's never made a mistake, anyone who's never failed, has never tried.
haven't done anything.
And is that the life you really want? And is that living truly that you haven't tried anything new? And so I think that's what we're speaking to. We want to encourage people to lean into is if the fear of failure means or how you label things as failure and it gets too rigid in that, do you end up not trying anything new? Do you end up avoiding the not trying? And where does that leave you in life?
Yeah. Not living. Well, I think Einstein said it better than I could have. So yeah, just appreciate you, Anthony, and yeah, sharing a bit and being able to share some things and lessons that failure has taught me. And yeah, hope that y'all enjoyed this episode.